Winter Field Day 2022 was the last weekend in January, the 29th through the 30th, and several local hams, Greg N4KGL, Daniel K4MDA, Scott KF7MYF, Frank KC8VKA, and I camped out at Pine Log State Forest Sand Pond Campground for the event. The forecast looked like we were in for a cold weekend, but fortunately there was no rain in the forecast. But I guess that's what Winter Field Day is all about. Actually, I do prefer to camp in cold weather, but honestly, this weekend came pretty close to my limit, especially since I camp in the back of a pickup truck. Sure, I had a heated blanket, and it surely beats a tent, but getting out of bed when it's too cold isn't exactly enjoyable first thing in the morning. Fortunately, there's always hot coffee. I arrived Friday afternoon around 3:30 and went ahead and set up my tent. This was kind of new to me. Well, sort of. I have a 10-foot by 10-foot pop-up canopy for a few years now, and I've had a wall kit to give some protection from the wind, but it was always difficult to set up and didn't really work all that great. But for this event, I used my newly purchased camping cube. This attaches to the underside of the same canopy that I had used in the past, but not only does it have 4 walls, but a floor and a ceiling, and does a much better job of keeping out the drafty winter wind. I brought along a space heater since the campground has electrical, and this really helped keep the inside of the cube stay warm. That night it cooled off to around 30 or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and inside the camper shell, in the truck bed using an electric blanket, I stayed quite comfortable. The next morning I got up around 7 a.m. It was chilly, but nothing warms you up like a nice hot cup of coffee. After a couple cups of coffee, I got breakfast going. Since Carla wasn't able to come on this trip, I had to cook for myself. Unfortunately, I forgot a few things for breakfast. I usually enjoy eggs and Kaneka sausage for breakfast. If you've never had Kaneka sausage, I highly recommend it. But to my dismay, I left the sausage in the freezer at the house. So I had eggs and hot dogs. Yes, hot dogs. Well, it's a meat, right? Well, it's some sort of meat anyway. I chopped up some yellow bell pepper, onions, and mushrooms to mix in the eggs and sprinkled some cheese on top. It actually wasn't too bad despite the lack of sausage. Around 10 a.m. I began to set up the station. First I put up the antenna. My choice for the event was the Sotabeams Bandhopper linked dipole. The one I use is the 20, 30, 40 meter option. I spend most of my time on 20 and 40 meters anyway, so this is always a good option for me. If I wanted to work other bands, I do have an Elecraft T1 tuner I could use.
Look at that. Antenna is up.
For power, I have a Bioenno 120 watt solar panel that feeds my Bioenno 40 amp hour battery. And although we had a lot of shade in the campground, this still provided plenty of power to run my station, my laptop, and keep my accessories powered over the weekend. The radio I used is an Icom IC705. I've already mentioned the tuner, the Elecraft T1. It's a tiny tuner about the size of a deck of cards and runs off a 9-volt battery. To run the digital modes and the logging software, I have an Acer laptop with an 8th generation i5 processor. It's been a great laptop and has more than enough power to run the software needed. My only complaint about the laptop stems from my decision to upgrade it to Windows 11. Well, that's a story for another time. Getting the radio set up and connecting to FLDigi was a breeze and went off without a hitch. That's an absolute lie. I often find things are not as easy as they should be. The last time I used this software on this laptop, I used it with my Yaesu FT817. So that's how it was still set up. And getting the settings to work with the IC705 takes some fiddling. I was running an older version of FLDigi and FLRig that did not support the 705. It would work if I select the IC7300 and then change some settings in the 705. But I decided to download the latest version of FLRig and found that the IC705 is now listed in the transceiver list, eliminating the need to change all those settings. I was still fiddling with the software and radio interface when the event started. About 45 minutes into the event, I logged my first QSO with a station in Ontario, Canada. I got a few more QSOs in the logbook, then ended up going around and visiting some of my neighbors. Daniel K4MDA was a neighbor on one side of me, and I spent some time in his camp as he operated at his station. He was using an Icom IC7300 paired with a Wolf River coil. I believe a big part of the event is the socializing. I enjoy seeing what other hams have brought and set up. Speaking of other hams, Greg N4KGL was my neighbor on the other side of me. He was also using an IC7300, but his antenna of choice was a wire antenna in an inverted L running into an Icom AH4 tuner. He had a Sotabeams Bandhopper as a backup antenna. A few sites down from us was Scott KF7MYF. He was operating a Kenwood TS2000 and a multiband MFJ antenna similar to a G5RV. He was doing pretty well with PSK and CW using FLDigi. Next to Scott was Frank, KC8VKA. He didn't do much operating, but he had an impressive collection of radio go boxes and portable antennas. The most impressive of which was a 50-foot antenna on the trailer hitch mount of his van. Frank was the go-to guy for information, and there were many newer hams that utilized his wealth of knowledge. Later that evening, I cooked up some steak, asparagus, and sautéed mushrooms, garlic, and onions on the Coleman stove with a cast iron griddle. This is one of my favorite meals when camping, and you can bet that when I am camping, this is always on the menu one of those nights. I went on and logged a few more QSOs, but after 8 p.m. the temperatures were dropping quickly, and I ended up turning in around 9 p.m. I woke up the next morning to 26 degrees at 6 a.m. Fortunately, once again the heated blanket did the job and kept me comfortable throughout the night.
Alright, good morning everybody. It is Sunday, the 30th of January. Second day of Winter Field Day 2022, and it's 26 degrees here at the park, the campsite, so pretty chilly this morning, but slept well, had that heated blanket going in there, so it was quite comfortable. But we're going to get the radio set back up, maybe cook a little bit of breakfast, definitely get some coffee on, and get back on the radio.
I got the space heater fired up in the camping cube immediately, and I even brought the Coleman camp stove inside the cube to get the coffee going. I opened up the windows a bit to keep the carbon monoxide from building up, since there is this huge warning sticker on the stove. Better safe than sorry, I guess. We had been coordinating band usage via 2 meters so that we did not interfere with one another, but since it looked like I was the first one up and the first one on the radio, I had free range of the bands. 40 meters was hopping, and I enjoyed calling CQ and having quite a few people respond. After things warmed up a bit, I did a little bit more visiting around the campground as most of us were starting to pack things up. Eventually, Greg, N4KGL, was the only one left operating. In the end, I only had 31 contacts, but as I was telling others, to me, it's not about how many QSOs I get in the logbook, it's more about the experience. The camping, socializing, setting up the equipment, testing the equipment, trying different modes or whatever. To me, that's where I get the enjoyment. I had a great time camping with these hams. I enjoyed chatting and seeing what others brought, and I certainly will be looking forward to our next adventure out.